Another PBT extra, and this time we get to start with my favorite team, San Antonio Spurs. LaMarcus Aldridge, he retired kind of unexpectedly after joining the Brooklyn Nets from San Antonio. What do you think about his career?
It's a really impressive, career, long-term career. 5-time All-NBA, 7-time All-Star, and in some ways almost a little underrated because I don't think we ever got to see him on the biggest stages in some ways just because the Brandon Roy Blazers, because of Brandon Roy's body, just never got to live up to the potential that team had. That was on its way to being like a contender, and then we never got to see it. And it always feels like he was just kind of half a step off from contending on those teams. So I think he gets a little underrated, but personally in Portland, they should be retiring. I'm with Dame here. They should be retiring his jersey. What do you think? You saw a lot of him in San Antonio.
Yeah, the thing that I really like about LaMarcus Aldridge's game was that in San Antonio, he had 5.5 seasons there, and he was a 5-time All-NBA selection, right? And that was after being a franchise player for Portland for 9 years, which means that, he's almost like a fine wine. He just gets better and better with age. Yeah. And he was going to Brooklyn, and you started to see this could be actually pretty dangerous. He was starting with that lineup. But yeah, I think from my perspective, if you get better every year, throughout the course of your career, that's amazing. And I think two players that I think are similar in the way that they were able to be effective late in their careers were, Carmelo Anthony and LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, there's just nothing you can do LaMarcus Aldridge one-on-one. Like, he's just a scoring machine. It doesn't matter how old he is because you just can't guard him. And same with Carmelo Anthony. He could be like 50 years old. He's still going to get you at that 18-foot mid-range game. Like, it's just nothing you can do. It's an automatic bucket.
Yeah,
that's kind of the way I see both of them.
Yeah, and LaMarcus evolved his game too, right? Like he could post you up early in his career, but he developed the mid-range. He went out to the three. He saw where the game was going, and he had the skill set to be able to do that. And I hope he's happy. I appreciate him making a decision for his health and his family and his long term. And I think we all kind of we understand that. And I hope he finds some peace and happiness with that because he's had this amazing, almost Hall of Fame career. I'm not sure where he falls on that scale, but he's got to be in consideration. It's been that kind of career.
All the best to him. I hope he gets better and healthy as well. Another big man that we have talking about, this big man, it's like a renaissance almost, Kurt. Yeah. And I love it, being a 90s basketball fan, just like the way I was born and raised, right? And we have Jokic and Joel Embiid. What's your take with Jokic's amazing performances recently as of late? Who is the best big man of the NBA?
Yeah, it's so hard to determine because their games are so different still. And I'm with you. Jokic, who's probably the MVP front runner now, is he had the game, the 47-point game with the dagger in double overtime. That you need those signature moments to win MVP, right? Like you still, as great as the numbers are, and that he stayed healthy and done all this, you still need those signature moments, and he had one. But when you're just comparing who's better, it's a little bit what you're trying to do with the team, right? Because Jokic is obviously a better passer, and you make him the hub of your offense in a way that's much harder to do with Joel Embiid. But Joel Embiid has been the most dominant player in the NBA when he's healthy, right? Like he has been the most dominant player on both ends. He anchors their defense. If he plays like this in the playoffs, who's got an answer for him in the East? Does Brooklyn have an answer?
In the whole NBA.
No, is that so? He is such a dominant force. It's very different. It's really hard to compare. Again, the difference this year, both in MVP and first team All NBA, is probably just minutes because Jokic has played so many more minutes and therefore gets some value through that. But Embiid has just been such a force of nature when he plays this year. What do you think? You're the fine connoisseur of the fine wine of big men here. What do you see?
Swirling around the big, yeah. Look, I think Embiid is, like you said, dominant. I was watching him play, and I just thought to myself, it's just unfair. There was one in the first of all, when Steph Curry and Embiid were going back and forth, I was thinking I would love to just like get into that arena and watch this matchup. It was almost like a Vegas show, where you would just see like Madonna or Siegfried and Roy, like Frank Sinatra, like you're seeing people at the best players in the world going, and there's just nothing you could do. There's nothing you could do. There was a move where Joel Embiid had Draymond Green face up, right? And he just did like a little hesitation, and Draymond went all the way to the baseline, and he just went to middle and dunked it. And I was thinking to myself, how do you stop this? Like the guy is huge. He's 7 foot, 300 pounds. He can move like Hakeem Olajuwon. He can beat guys like Draymond Green who are, smaller and quicker than him off the dribble in a face-up scenario. I mean, and he there was another play in that same game where 3 white jerseys were around him and he just turned around and dunked it. Yeah. And I was like, that's like Shaq back in the day. Like, what can you do? Yeah. It was amazing. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Joel Embiid, when he's healthy, there's just no answers. There are no answers for him. But Jokic, I think, to me, is like an all-around. Like, I love the way he plays basketball. I think he's a great basketball mind.
Yeah, and they've built a great team around him. Unfortunately, we talk about Jamal Murray not being there hurts them, but he's the guy where now all these guys around him can cut. All these guys around him can hit threes, and suddenly you're like, well, you can't really stop him one-on-one. It's awkward, and it feels a little off balance, and it's not kind of forceful like Embiid, or he's not exactly Connie Hawkins graceful when he gets the ball, but the ball goes in. Like, he can shoot it. He gets it in, gets it off the angles, knows where to be. And then if you start to double him, if you start to try to take that away, he just picks you apart because of that IQ, because of that passing, and because now they've got the right guys around him to take advantage of that. Where Joel Embiid, you said, and you didn't even mention it. So if you put a really big guy on him, he'll trail the play, stand at the top, and drain the three from straight away pretty consistently, enough that you've got to bring somebody out. It's like you said, there's just no good answer for him. There's no way to stop him completely. And if he can play like that in the postseason, Philadelphia, hey man, I'd go to Philadelphia and get some cheesesteaks during the finals. I'm okay with that.
Hey, you can't complain with cheesesteaks, right?
No.
So let's think about the rest of the East for a second, Kurt. Let's look at this second tier. You have Brooklyn, Philadelphia, right, Milwaukee. But then after that, you have Atlanta, you have Boston, New York. What's your take on the second half of the Eastern Conference?
There's some potentially dangerous teams in there, right? There's some teams that are, first off, some teams that probably shouldn't go home in the first round that are going to, but there's also they're playing well right now. These are teams that are kind of come together. The Knicks have won 7 in a row as we record this, and every one of these teams, I think, is, I believe, 8-2 or something close to it over their last 10. Atlanta, everybody kind of sleeps on. I don't know how much people have watched them, or if they do, they're like, oh, it's all Trae Young, right? I'm going to give a quick shout out to their center. Clint Capella has been fantastic for them this year, particularly defensively, because that's not a necessarily strong defensive perimeter team. You're just trying to cover up for Trae Young. They throw him out there and say, just block it, man. Just take over the paint and own it. And he's really taken a step forward this year, both defensively and a little bit offensively, but he's really taken a step forward and is going to get some defensive player of the year type consideration. He's been fantastic. And all that said, Boston's the team that scares me. What about, that's the team where that team could put together a run. What about you? Yeah,
100%. I think Boston, for me, I'm still holding on to the Boston dream. I just think that, you just have too much talent. And I feel that if they can just figure out this identity question that we mentioned before, is it Jason Tatum's team or Jaylen Brown's team? I think that's it reminds me of Oklahoma City Thunder back in the day when you had KD, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden all in the beginning of their careers playing together. Yeah. And it's just like, how do we do this then? They were just too young. And then now we're starting to see James Harden and KD together in Brooklyn. It's like, wow, it's like best team in the league. So it's like the same type of thing, but just, at the beginning of their careers. So that is like a question mark to me. But I'm with you on Atlanta. It's interesting. I think the mid-season coaching change kind of put a fire underneath them. And I think that they're playing with, we have a lot to prove, which is interesting that they're sitting at 4. Right outside the top tier, and still people are sleeping on them. I think they kind of are like the dark horse. For me, like what Miami was last year is kind of what Atlanta is this year.
And we probably shouldn't sleep on Miami, by the way. They've still got all the pieces to put this together, even though they kind of haven't yet. But I'm with you. The other thing with Boston is they got healthy, right? Kemba Walker missed the start of the season, and he wasn't quite right. He has started to play more like himself, and Jason Tatum was hit hard by COVID, really hard. And admits to this day, he's using now an inhaler before games to get his lungs right because his breathing hasn't been right since he got it. But he's starting to look more like himself. He's starting to take those all NBA games, those moments where he's taking over on a big stage. It's still kind of the big 3 in the East and everybody else. But if Boston gets through as the 4th seed and is facing Philly in that second round, I'm tuning in. That's a good series right there.
7-game series. I would like, it probably wouldn't go the distance, but I mean, hey, I'm with you. I would like to see those games. One other young star that is hopefully coming back from injury, LaMelo Ball, right? 7 to 10 days out, it looks like, from returning to competition, fractured wrist. What are your thoughts on the Charlotte Hornets and LaMelo Ball's return?
I'm just excited to see it. That guy, we've talked about this. He has that it factor. You want to watch him play. And the Hornets are just finally getting healthy. I mean, they've been without Gordon Hayward for a bit. If they can get everybody back, they just become an entertaining, kind of tough out in the first round. I'm probably not advancing, but like they've got some players who are going to – they've got some young players who could learn a lot from a playoff experience, even if it's one and done. That'll be good for them. I'm just excited to see him back on the court. I think that there's – I'm curious, do you think any rookies kind of – to me, he's still the rookie of the year. But do you think anybody made a run at this? Do you think there's some guys out there worth noting who've kind of made a push of late?
Yeah, I think my favorite rookies in the NBA right now, I think you have to say Anthony Edwards is probably getting close to the conversation as far as, he's been kind of whittling away over there in Minnesota in the sense like he's just going to work every day and he's putting out some pretty interesting games and he has the confidence to go out there and take those shots. And on a team, mind you, with Karl Anthony Towns, like this is not like he's just all alone. Like he has some good players around him, some guys with a lot of NBA experience. So yeah, I think Anthony Edwards, and then the other rookies that I think are honorable mention. I don't think they're rookie of the year contenders, but I still really like watching them. Are Emmanuel Quickley for New York and Tyrese Halliburton. I think they've both done really well this season.
Yeah, can I throw one quick shout out to a guy who's really come on late too, which is Saddiq Bey out in Detroit. Saddiq Bey is knocking down threes, defending. Dwayne Casey's kind of giving him a bit more of a green light, and he has taken advantage of it. And Saddiq Bey can play, man. Saddiq Bey looks like a guy who's just one of those Villanova guys, just fitting right into the NBA. Knows how to play the system. He's been really good. But yeah, I'm with you. Anthony Edwards has what rookie wall? I mean, he just powered right through it, and he's dunked over it. Basically, he's gotten more efficient. He was so rough at the start of the season, and it's not rough anymore. He's been so smooth that he's moved his way up. I honestly, midway through the year, I was like, is he even first team all rookie? He's really not. He was still trying to find his way, but he has really found a groove since then.
Sometimes you just need some time, right?
Yeah, I mean, the game is so much faster. Everybody's big and athletic. And the travel, you're playing way more. It's just an adjustment, and some guys it takes a little bit. He seems to have found it, and the man is not lacking for confidence. Him and his 100-mile-an-hour fastball.
So on a much more somber note, one of the last things that we want to bring up is the George Floyd trial. So Derek Chauvin was convicted on guilty on all counts that he faced over the death of George Floyd last summer. The NBA has been extremely vocal as far as its players speaking out on this issue, most notably in the bubble, where there's almost a strike in the middle of the playoffs. So what's your take on how the NBA has handled all this, how the NBA players are reacting to the news?
I love that the NBA encouraged them to be proactive like this. They didn't, oh my, we might anger some of the fan base and try to funnel it either outside the court. I mean, they put Black Lives Matter on the court in the bubble, and they've encouraged this. So I think that they've handled it well because, at least to me, that brings a level of authenticity. Like, I want the players to be real. I want to know them as people, not just, fantasy cogs in my fantasy basketball team, right? Like, I want to see who they are and what they care about. And this goes a long way. I think LeBron helps lead this. There's Chris Paul, other guys, but I think the league has handled. I love that they've kind of put this front and center. What about you?
Yeah, 100%. I think from my perspective, you have guys who are being vocal, and then they're also taking action. Jaylen Brown drove how many hours? 10 plus hours to go to a rally in Atlanta. You have obviously LeBron James with the I Promise School, who's been working on the ground and saying, look, like, we're trying to create opportunities for minorities, and we're trying to do things with voting rights. And so I love that concept of, look, we've been vocal, but we're putting our weight behind this in actual action. I think when you think about the roles, how do you address systemic issues? I think first you have to acknowledge it, right? First, you kind of have to look at it and say, this is a problem, right? Then you have to address it and hold people accountable, which happened, right? And say, you can't do this. And then the next step is to prevent this from happening in the future with policy, right? So you see that with the NBA, they basically said, look, you can we're going to put together these PSA ads during the most, vital part of our season, the playoffs. So everyone knows that we're supporting our players as they try to get the word out and try to get people to the polls and try to get people registered to vote so they can start changing things on a local, state, national level. And then now the next step is in the lawmakers' hands, right? So I think that's kind of the process I see of activism, and it's very encouraging for me to see the league support its players as they try to fight for what's important to them. Like you said, it makes it authentic, and most importantly, that they have a platform, they have a voice, and this is something that they believe in.
And that voice, because of that platform they have on social media and just being an NBA player, is a little louder and can carry some weight and be the voice of other people who aren't as easily heard. And it felt they have not been heard for a very long time. So yeah, I love and encourage this, and hopefully, like you said, this is just the first of multiple steps to hope address a lot of systemic issues in our culture.
There's a brighter day coming, Kurt, right?
So